Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you are all well. You amazing, amazing people, you. I hope you are having a fantastic week so far, even though we're only just started, really, aren't we? We're on the first couple of rungs of the ladder that is the week, and you're looking amazing for it. So the first couple of rungs have been good to you. But we are talking about means, motive, and opportunity. I was inspired by JB Gunner the other day, who had been speaking on means, motive, and opportunity. But it shows you that different people look at things a different way. And even though certain things I feel is 100% accurate when we look at Bryan Kohberger in terms of means, motive, and opportunity, there are certain nuances that I think is very important to understand when we look at means, motive, and opportunity. Because are there clues when we look at Bryan Kohberger and we look at means, motive, and opportunity that enables us to establish exactly why he's in the position that he's in, what makes him an extremely good candidate for such a crime, but also why that also passes over to multiple other people around the Idaho 4? And in fact, is it because of modern day policing that we see issues in many, many cases? Again, what me and JB Gunner have spoken about consistently is statistics when it comes to crimes. Like JB Gunner has spoken about the fact that around 50% of homicides are what get solved in the US. I've spoken recently on the statistical analysis in terms of wrongful convictions. We've looked at Christopher Tapp, for instance, and the fact that this was a guy who lost his life following 20 years of wrongful incarceration. And when you deep dive into Christopher Tapp and the situation surrounding his incarceration, it's very clear that law enforcement or certain people who were involved in that investigation, they lied. They lied. They entered into tactics that were it was inexcusable. It shouldn't have happened. To feed him information that only they and the killer would know, and then use that against him, seemingly to push the fact that he knew it already when they were the source of that information. Little things like that. But anyway, means, motive, and opportunity. This is kind of the cardinal framework for policing and has been for many, many years. Means as in, does this person have the means to commit this crime? Do they have the physical capacity to do it? Are they able-bodied enough to do it? Like if someone walks into a place and they've like in the Idaho 4 case, we've got 4 young adults, and then we've got a perpetrator or a named perpetrator. This is the person who we're supposed to believe did this. Does he have the capacity, the capability to do it? Now, when we talk about means and we're put into this constraint of time, does Bryan Kohberger truly have the means? Does he have the means to enter into a property with a military weapon, if you like? And that's what we've been led. Let's do a side note here and factor in the fact that we don't know if that is the weapon that was used. That's become, again, I speak about when we are programmed to feel a certain way. We are conditioned to think we believe that the killer drove a white Hyundai Elantra, that the killer used a K-bar knife in the crime, that they left behind the sheath that belonged to that murder weapon. But these are all things that have not been factually stated. They're not been stated as, yes, this is the weapon that was used. The knife sheath fitted the knife. It was definitely the murder weapon sheath, so on and so forth. And do you know what I mean? All these things are not factual. But when you're putting Bryan Kohberger, this person who we've seen, we don't know him, so we can only sort of ascertain certain things about him. But does he have the physical prowess, the skill, the knowledge to undertake this crime this quickly and get away and end up with a car with no trace of DNA whatsoever? And people are going to be on the fence with this because people are going to turn around and they're going to say, well, to be fair, if he did it and he drove his own car and he's done it in this amount of time, he's done it so quickly, then in theory, there should be things in his car. There should be something. They would have gone over that car with a fine tooth comb, inside, outside, and there was nothing. Many specialists come out and said that would be a petri dish of evidence, and it wasn't. There was nothing there whatsoever. And as far as we know, in terms of the general public, we've not heard of any other DNA being found. And I'm not saying it hasn't been, we just haven't been told that it has, except on the knife sheath itself. And we're going to come back to that shortly. But means, I think, is a difficult one. In terms of physicality, is someone able-bodied, then yes, it could be argued that anybody around this group of victims had the ability to it, the means to do it. It could be argued that some were perhaps had more of a means because they would have potentially had people who could do it with them, which would have made it quicker, made it easier to handle. And, you know, again, that's just spitballing. But when you factor in a crime with this many victims, this speed, and seemingly that would have been including cleaning up, making sure that you can get out there without bringing anything out of the house and into your car, then that's skill. That's skill. I would struggle to think that someone on their first rodeo would have been able to pull this off, but I could be wrong. Motive. So when we talk about motive, revenge is a massive one for motive. Someone who is vengeful. They want to get someone back. Or there is a benefit to them. Is it monetary benefit? Is it positionary benefit? You know, is it if you remove that person from the equation, then you become number one on the podium? Do you know what I mean? Or whatever happens, there has to be a benefit. There has to be a benefit in some way, shape, or form. Like even someone who is psychotic, a psychopath, that is the crime is to release the valve. Ted Bundy spoke about the fact that when he wasn't killing, it was like this thing building up inside him, building up. And to kill was to release that valve. Psh, and it resets itself, and then it rebuilds. Psh, and that's what they kill for. They kill to bring that valve, that pressure that he noted it as pain. It was like a physical pain. It had to be done. It wasn't even a case of wanting to be done. It needed to be done. Some people say like a bloodthirst, if you like. And so was Bryan Kohberger a psychopath? And this is something that they would have to go down the route of, you know, to get a doctor involved to find out and to study him and find out whether he was eliciting signs that would accommodate that as a theory. But if that doesn't exist, then what was the benefit to it? What was the point of this crime even taking place in the first place? Was it just random? I do not believe in random, and I've said that with this crime. This was not an easy crime to take on. If you was just about releasing the valve like a Ted Bundy figure, you could have found a property that had two old people in it, an elderly couple, and forced your way into the property and just released the valve. This was a crime that was a challenge. It was a challenge. There was a potential for there to be multiple people in this property. Because if you don't believe that they took a risk, then you must believe in that they were either watching that property, had means to watch it from a distance, or someone was feeding them information. You can't have your cake and eat it. He either entered into this property blind or he did not. He had prior knowledge and notification of when was the perfect time to enter. But motive is a big struggle in this crime, because you have to try and understand. And people turn around and say you don't need it, but you do. There has to be a motive. Again, the construct of this is means, motive, and opportunity, which takes us to opportunity. Did Bryan have the opportunity to do it? And this is where the complexities of the Idaho 4 case comes into effect. Because if this crime happened when Bryan Kohberger was in the area, then yes, he had opportunity. If it happened when he wasn't in the area and he could then bring in alibi, which then removes him from the equation, then you have a problem. Now, if this crime would have happened at, say, around between 2 and 3, or between 2 and 4 even. If we say that, between 2 and 4 it happened. Now, just say Bryan Kohberger was seen in his car, and it was him in that white Hyundai Elantra, and we can tell that he was still driving around at 4:04 and then 4:20, but we know that the crime happened much earlier, and he could be proven to be somewhere else much earlier, then, or the car moving at least through forensic, vehicular forensics, like a Burla report perhaps. They needed to bring Bryan Kohberger into the opportunity situation. Did he have opportunity? Yes, he had an opportunity, because at this specific time, he was in this specific area. So let's, for 1 second, conclude that it is indeed his car in the camera. That's where we then have to establish whether the crime did truly take place when he was in the area. And I believe this is what Ann Taylor is trying to allude to when she talks about that her client was not in the area at the time of the crime. Perhaps he was in the area at a time they believe this crime didn't take place, and he was somewhere else when the crime did take place. And they're going to try and argue time of death. And again, there was factors that we have spoken about just yesterday, with the door being left open. Perhaps, I believe that door was open. I do believe. So, and Kathy Mabbutt coming out early on and stating that the time of death was earlier on. Ethan Chapin's mum airily stating that 2 a.m. would potentially be a dark time. And again, these are all things that there could be other meanings behind them, but we're looking at means, motive, and opportunity. Did Bryan Kohberger truly have the means? Now, I think that is questionable. Did Bryan Kohberger have the means? If you put Bryan Kohberger, and again, I'm not saying this for accusatory reasons, but let's look at Brent Kohberger, for instance. Who do you think would be the more means-worthy, capable person to do this crime? Nobody is going to say Bryan Kohberger over Brent Kohberger. Not one single person. If they're being honest, a crime of this many victims using this specific weapon in this amount of time, and factoring in that Bryan Kohberger's car had no DNA in it whatsoever, anybody with half a brain would say, well, Brent Kohberger is clearly the person who did it then. If you had to say which one did it, it would be him. And again, this isn't for accusatory, because nobody has shown anything in terms of evidence towards Brent Kohberger, but Bryan Kohberger by default, because you turn around and say, well, it wasn't Brent Kohberger, it has to be Bryan Kohberger. Do you see what I mean? Now, when it comes to means, motive, and opportunity, I want you to just look at this. This was something that talked about bias. And this, I'm going to read from this section here, which it says, these criminologists theorize that in the case of limited budgets, criminal investigators rely on the profiled and statistical likelihood of particular groups of people being convicted for the type of crimes that they are being investigated, and ignore complaints that are filed about people who they consider less likely to commit the crimes, or give the tracking or individual matching to the evidence lower priority. According to the hypothesis, even a minimal or non-existent difference in the likelihood of committing crimes can be hidden behind a difference of a factor by many multiples in the likelihood of being convicted due to self-fulfilling prophecies in the statistics. These criminologists feel that criminals who are not getting caught due to being profiled as unlikely offenders are a major problem. Some of these criminologists propose an increased number of police officers. Others argue that investigations of the evidence are more expensive than police patrols, and that not all crimes can be investigated, suggesting that profiling of criminal psychology should be replaced with randomized priorities of individual suspects within similar types of crime. Now, what they're basically saying here is when you look at police who are on restricted budgets, restricted bodies, if you like, what they have access to, perhaps with additional pressure as well, University of Idaho, that they could just lean on what they believe to be the case here. And we saw this right at the beginning of the Idaho 4 case when they talked about crime of passion. Now, we even seen Bryan Kohberger do that himself. He resorted to crime of passion, and that is textbook investigation. That is defaulting to what they believed this would be in terms of the book of modern-day policing. Oh, this is a crime of passion. There were females, so we're looking for a male who was obsessed with one of the females. We've got females who, because of modern-day life, they're on social media. We can see that they're got themselves on there with swimwear on there. So it's someone who's seen them. They perhaps have realized that they're possibly involved in other sites where you get to see these females. You know what I'm getting at. And that's where this infatuation has crept in. And they then don't look at anything else. Nothing else matters. Everything fades to black. But means, motive, and opportunity. You could argue either way. Opportunity, did Bryan have the opportunity? If you factor in a specific time, then yes, he had opportunity. But did the crime happen at that time? Means, did he have the means to do it? That is arguable. I believe that is arguable. Anybody can go in and do a crime, but did Bryan have the skill to do this crime this quickly and without dragging shit through his car? And if that's the case, then how did he so meticulously clean or prep his car, but then make the fatal flaw of leaving a knife sheath behind? This is back to that genius-idiot mix, the conundrum. And the motive. The motive here is completely missing. Completely missing. Unless we're going to resort back to textbook policing. And Bryan Kohberger become infatuated with one of these girls, and the rest is history. The rest were collateral damage. I don't believe that that was the case, because there'd have been an easier way to do this. And I don't think there would have been so many victims involved. If this was an infatuation with Kaylee or Maddie, for instance, then what brought Xana and Ethan into the fray? Bearing in mind, it would appear that this person actively went to their room. They didn't have to go there. Where Steve Gonsalves said they didn't have to go upstairs, you could argue they didn't have to go downstairs into Ethan and Xana if that was targeted, and that was targeted for one of them girls on the top floor. Let me know down below what you think. I'll catch you all later today. We're talking Richard Allen.